She never expected her perfect world to collapse in front of the entire restaurant. But when her husband stood up and revealed the truth about the woman she had misjudged, everyone heard the words that changed everything. Before we dive in, make sure you subscribe to Black Inside 2.0 for more powerful emotional stories that touch the heart. The afternoon sun filtered through the crystal windows of Leveroy's, the most exclusive restaurant in the city. Everything sparkled, the glasses, the marble floors, even the quiet confidence of the guests who gathered there. It was the kind of place where people went not just to eat, but to be seen. At the center table, surrounded by white linens and the soft hum of elegant conversation, Margaret Delacroix sat in her flawless red dress, the kind that made every head turn the moment she walked in. Her golden hair curled perfectly over her shoulders. To anyone watching, she looked like a woman who had everything under control: her life, her marriage, her image. But beneath the polished surface, something else lived there, a constant fear of losing the status she worked so hard to display. Across from her sat her husband, Jonathan, a calm, thoughtful man with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He had the quiet demeanor of someone who valued character far more than presentation. While Margaret lived for the admiration of the world, Jonathan lived for truth. And on this day, truth was about to make a very dramatic entrance. A young server approached their table, Elise. She moved with grace, her uniform crisp and spotless. She greeted the couple with a gentle smile. "Good afternoon, may I bring you something to drink?" Jonathan nodded warmly, but Margaret barely looked at her. To Margaret, she was simply another staff member in a busy restaurant. Someone expected to blend into the background. Someone who, in Margaret's eyes at least, had little power in the world. Margaret lifted her menu, scanning it with a dissatisfied sigh. "I asked for a chilled glass," she said sharply, noticing the water Elise had placed was slightly warm. "Is it that hard to get something right?" Elise bowed her head politely. "My apologies, ma'am, I'll replace it right away." Jonathan frowned slightly at Margaret's tone. "Margaret," he murmured, "she's just doing her job." But Margaret dismissed him with a wave of her hand. The server stepped away, and for a few moments, the restaurant returned to its quiet hum. But when she came back, with the correct glass this time, Margaret's eyes narrowed again. The server's sleeve had the slightest crease from carrying a tray earlier. That tiny detail was all it took. Margaret reached forward suddenly, pinching the corner of Elise's sleeve between her manicured fingers. "This," she said sharply, "is completely unprofessional. Look at this crease. Do you know how your appearance reflects on this establishment?" Elise froze, stunned. Jonathan's jaw tensed. Other guests started turning their heads. Whispers rose like drifting smoke through the room. Margaret, completely lost in her frustration, tugged the sleeve to demonstrate her point. The fabric cold, the seams strained. Elise winced, not from pain, but from embarrassment. Jonathan stood immediately. "Margaret," he said firmly, "that's enough." But Margaret, her pride inflamed and her voice rising, didn't stop. "I expect proper service in a place like this. How difficult is it to look presentable?" Her voice echoed across the room. Jonathan stared at his wife, not with anger, but with disappointment so deep the guests around them felt it. He stepped between Margaret and Elise, gently releasing the server's arm from his wife's grip. "Margaret," he said quietly, "you have absolutely no idea who you're speaking to." Elise looked down, cheeks flushed, still trying to maintain composure. Margaret lifted her chin. "Oh, please, Jonathan. She's just a..." Jonathan held up a hand. "No," he said, "she's not just anything. And you need to hear the truth." The room went silent. Elise looked almost afraid, but Jonathan gave her a small nod of reassurance. He turned to Margaret, who now looked confused. "You see her uniform," he began softly. "But what you don't see is her story." Margaret crossed her arms, but her eyes revealed uncertainty. Jonathan continued, "Elise isn't only a server. She's a graduate of one of the top culinary institutes. She was hired here on a fast-track program to become the youngest sous chef the restaurant has ever had. She's working tables today because she volunteered to help the team while they're understaffed." Margaret blinked, stunned by the revelation. But Jonathan wasn't finished. "And what's more, I know Elise." Margaret's voice cracked. "You do?" Jonathan nodded. "I mentor selected young professionals each year, people with extraordinary potential. Elise is one of them. She's brilliant, compassionate, and hardworking. She's been through challenges that would break most people, yet she never complains. She only shows kindness." He turned to Elise gently. "And I'm sorry you had to experience this." Margaret felt something in her chest tighten. This wasn't going the way she imagined. The room's silent attention pressed against her pride. For the first time, she looked at Elise, really looked. Not as a uniform, not as a role, but as a person. Elise swallowed, her voice soft. It's all right, I understand people have bad days. But Jonathan shook his head. No, not like this. Margaret's voice suddenly sounded much smaller. Why didn't you tell me this? She whispered. Jonathan sighed. Because you should treat everyone with respect, not only those with titles. Kindness shouldn't require a resume. Margaret looked down at her hands. She had always believed she carried herself with elegance. But in that moment, she felt fragile, like some part of her identity had shattered under its own weight. Elise stepped back politely, giving the couple space. Jonathan sat beside his wife again, speaking gently now. Margaret, when did we become people who judge so quickly? When did appearances start meaning more than kindness? Margaret's eyes filled with tears she tried desperately to hide. The truth was, she had spent so much time protecting her image that she forgot to protect her heart. As the restaurant resumed its soft music, Margaret inhaled shakily. She thought of the times she had spoken sharply to others, staff, drivers, assistants, people she'd assumed held less importance in the world. But today, in front of strangers, her own husband had held up a mirror. And she didn't like the reflection staring back. She turned toward Elise, her voice trembling. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have spoken to you that way. It wasn't fair. Elise smiled softly. It's all right. What matters is what we learn moving forward. Jonathan nodded approvingly. Margaret's heart warmed with both relief and humility. In that moment, she realized something profound. It was never about the crease in a sleeve. It was about the crease in her own spirit, one she hadn't noticed forming. Jonathan stood and addressed Elise again. Elise, he said, I'd like you to join us for a moment. She looked surprised. Margaret looked even more so. Jonathan continued, You've been accepted into the restaurant's advanced development program. I was planning to help announce it soon, but I think today is the day. Elise's eyes widened with disbelief. Are you serious? Jonathan smiled. You've earned it. Margaret wiped her eyes quickly, trying to regain composure. But instead of feeling embarrassed, she felt grateful. Congratulations, she said sincerely. You deserve it. The energy in the room softened. Several guests smiled, some even clapped quietly. Elise bowed her head appreciatively. Thank you, both of you. As Elise walked away, Margaret exhaled slowly. Jonathan reached for her hand. I know you didn't mean harm, he said gently. But sometimes life stops us in our tracks to remind us who we want to be. Margaret looked at him with gratitude. Thank you, she whispered, for reminding me. Jonathan smiled. True elegance, he said, has nothing to do with clothes or restaurants. It's in the way we treat people. Margaret nodded, feeling her heart soften. That day, in the middle of a glamorous dining hall, she learned a truth she would never forget. The greatest form of grace is humility. Life gives us countless chances to choose understanding over assumption. The people we meet may be battling unseen challenges, pursuing dreams quietly, carrying responsibilities we'll never know. A gentle word can lift someone, a harsh word can break someone, and a moment of compassion can transform an entire day. Margaret walked out of the restaurant changed, not by shame but by awakening. And Elise, she walked forward with a bright future, her spirit unshaken, her quiet strength finally recognized. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Black Inside 2.0 for more deep, emotional, life-changing stories. Your support helps us bring powerful narratives to life every week.